We have already talked about blocking and net play in our Volleyball Academy. Back then, it was mainly about single blocking, situations where one player reacts alone. But in real matches, double or even triple blocks are much more common. And today, we'll be talking about these tightly synchronized human walls.
At first glance, it looks easy. Two players jump next to each other, and that's it. But it's far from simple. This needs to be deliberately taught from an early age. There are two ways to form a double block. The first is when one player is already in position and the other joins in, synchronizing in both timing and jump. The movement toward the teammate is done either by a simple sidestep or, more often, using what we call a crossover step. We've discussed this before. You might remember when we talked about foot positioning during shifts.
But be careful. It's not just about standing next to each other. A double block must be like one thought shared between two minds. Compact, airtight, solid. No, I'm here, you're there. One block, two bodies, one will. From dry drills without the ball or distractions, we move on to overballs. Balls tossed over the net during a jump. And once that starts to stick, we introduce attacking. Not at full speed at first, but from an elevated position, so the player doesn't have to handle too many variables at once. It's a helpful simplification. It lets players focus on the essentials: timing, jumping, and hand positioning.
Let's now see how this blocking form works in real games, in youth and top-level volleyball. In these clips, we see theory transform into movement, decision-making, and reaction to the opponent. Watch how players move toward each other, sync their jumps and hand positions, and try to form a compact double block, even under pressure. Only gameplay reveals what players have mastered and what still needs refinement.
In modern volleyball, we increasingly see situations where not just one player moves to block, but both, the wing and the middle blocker. This is a result of the game's evolution. I won't go into too much detail, but essentially, wing blockers now also need to help in the middle, so both players shift sideways, not just the middle. This, of course, requires better timing, game reading, and coordination.
That's why this type of movement needs to be trained from a young age. Even if kids aren't really blocking yet, their bodies are learning the right direction, rhythm, and coordination. When these movements are ingrained correctly early on, they can be applied to real matches later. The training sequence is familiar. First dry drills, then overballs. It's essential that after the jump, hands don't just hang in the air like antennas. They must immediately penetrate the opponent's court, just like elite players do.
Then come the ball drills. These are usually introduced around the age of 12. At that point, children can consciously engage their whole body, stabilize their core, arms and fingers. More importantly, they begin to understand what they're doing and why. Now we're approaching the junior age group 16 to 18 years old. It's not perfect yet, but we're getting close.
Again, let's look at those who do it best. A key element is the synchronized backward arm motion before jumping, almost like a dance.
Volleyball is a game of timing. The attacking team always tries to prevent the defense from forming a double or triple block. That's why we often see the middle blocker arriving at the last second, and sometimes the double block doesn't even look like one. Still, the middle blocker tries to get their hands over the net, even partially or just visually. And even that has value. The attacker knows someone is there, and that alone can influence their decision. Sometimes it's right on the edge. The middle blocker doesn't reach the jump position in time and has to jump off one foot. It's not ideal, but it's better than nothing. Even that jump can throw off the attacker or slow their swing, and that's the point.
Trying to form a double block is, of course, not without errors. Some we already know from single blocking, getting the ball wiped off the hands, the block being too weak and getting overpowered. But with double blocks, the biggest weakness is something else. When it's not two players forming one block, but two separate blockers standing side by side, and between them, a gap, maybe half a meter, just enough for the attacker to score. But remember, sometimes the game presents situations where building the perfect block isn't possible. In those cases, it's not a mistake, but a necessity. And even an imperfect block can be good defense if players react the right way.
The goal of the double block is essentially twofold. The first and most obvious is to score a direct point, to block the attacker so that the ball lands on their side or never crosses the net. But blocking isn't just about building a wall. The second goal of the double block is to force the attacker to change their shot, push them out of their comfort zone and into areas where we have our defense set. Ideally, into spots where our libero operates, the game-reading, reactive, precise defense specialist. A compact block doesn't just defend, it guides. And when that works, backcourt defense can turn into a counterattack, which is the ultimate goal.
And one more important note, a well-formed block doesn't even have to touch the ball to make a difference. If it's compact, well-timed and squarely in the attacker's path, it can force a mistake, like a spike out of bounds. That too is a win for the block. And finally, let's enjoy a selection of moments from the 2025 Champions League final, where blocking played a key role. We'll see big plays as well as subtle moments that made the difference.
Blocking is perhaps the hardest skill to train. Players rarely make direct contact with the ball during it, often jumping over and over for nothing, with no clear payoff. They spend minutes or entire practice segments on movement that doesn't offer immediate reward. That's why blocking is so demanding on patience and belief in what you're doing. But when it finally works, when the block lands, stops the attack, that moment has a special flavor. There's a quiet joy in finally succeeding at something that's been invisible for so long, but was worth the wait.
Among volleyball skills, blocking holds a unique place. Why? Because its impact is hard to measure. A blocked ball is a clear stat, but there are usually only a few per set, statistically 2 or 3. Yet even without a single direct block, a good double or triple block can massively help the defense. Stats won't show that. Still, when a block really stops the ball, it's one of the most satisfying moments in volleyball.